They laughed when I said I wanted to start over at 68. Said I should retire in peace, take up gardening, maybe bingo if I could still hear the numbers being called. My niece, Melanie, looked me dead in the eye and said, "You had your time, Grandpa. Let the rest of us take it from here." So I did exactly what she told me to. I retired. In peace. Right into the penthouse suite of their failing hotel. The same one I bought out from under them using profits from the soap business they said would never work. They thought they were writing me off. What they really did was set the stage for the biggest comeback of my life. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me thank you for your continuous support. If you love stories like this one, support us by subscribing to this channel and comment where you are watching us from. It will be great to hear from you. Now let's jump into the details of what happened. They always laughed when I said I still had ideas left in me. Not the soft, dismissive kind of laughter either, but the kind that stings. The kind that travels around dinner tables, becomes part of family lore, and resurfaces just when you think you've finally earned a little grace. My name's Harold Klein, 68 years old when this all started. I was a widower of 12 years, former accountant turned reluctant retiree, and the kind of man who liked his routines the way others liked their coffee, strong, simple, and served quietly. I lived in a modest bungalow 2 blocks from the high school my sons once attended, the kind with creaky floorboards and windows that sighed when the wind pushed too hard. Life wasn't bad, it just wasn't finished. Not for me. But to my family, especially my niece Melanie, I was already on the clearance rack of life. Unnecessary. Sentimental. Expired. "Come on, Grandpa," she'd say with that syrupy voice she used for both toddlers and tech-challenged elders. "You've worked hard. Just enjoy the rest of your time. Travel. Garden. Watch some Netflix." Melanie wasn't my granddaughter, to be clear. She just called me Grandpa because I happened to be the oldest living relative she could still exploit without feeling guilty. My older brother, Benjamin, her father, passed 5 years before, leaving behind the Klein Boutique Hotel, a once charming downtown property that had long since lost its luster and, frankly, its customer base. Melanie and her 2 brothers, Darren and Scott, had inherited it and taken over management like kids playing Monopoly, excited at first, then clueless, and eventually hostile when things didn't go their way. I tried to help. I did. "You're overspending on marketing and underinvesting in renovations," I once told her after reviewing their quarterly numbers over Thanksgiving dinner. She didn't even look up from her wine glass. "That's cute," she said, with a smirk that made me feel about 2 inches tall. "Did you Google that advice, or did it come to you in a dream?" Everyone laughed. Even my youngest son, Aaron, let out a chuckle, though he tried to hide it behind his napkin. I said nothing and finished my turkey. That was 2 years ago. I had started dabbling with soap making around that time. What began as a simple hobby, something to keep my hands busy and my mind from spiraling, had turned into a curious obsession. I liked the science of it, the balance of lye and oils, the experimentation with scents and textures. There was peace in the process, something I hadn't felt in years. I made bars for friends, then neighbors, then their friends. Word spread faster than I expected. A local farmer's market offered me a booth. Then a boutique wellness shop asked if they could stock my Grandpa Suds collection. I winced at the name, but they said it would sell. And it did. Still, I never brought it up at family gatherings. Not anymore. At Melanie's birthday dinner, held at their failing hotel's ballroom, sparsely attended and dimly lit, I overheard her talking to one of her friends about how hilarious it was that I was still trying to be an entrepreneur. "He's like a toddler with a retirement fund," she laughed. "Playing business while we do real work." I wanted to walk out right then, but I didn't. I smiled, ate my overcooked steak, and made a promise to myself right there under the flickering chandelier. They would never laugh at me again. That night, I went home and pulled out the old notebooks I'd used to track soap recipes and cost breakdowns. My margins were better than I thought. Demand had outpaced production. I hired a part-time assistant, then another. Shifted from hand-cutting every bar to investing in molds. Set up a small online store. Designed by a college student, I paid under the table with peppermint-scented soap and a $200 gift card to Best Buy. Then came the video. A young influencer with a decent following. Someone who'd bought my soap at a local craft fair. posted a 30-second review of my oatmeal and honey blend, called it Grandpa Core and the realest luxury bar ever. Her audience exploded. Sales tripled in a week. I barely slept. My assistant quit her day job to help full-time. We rented a small warehouse. By the end of the year, I'd cleared 6 figures in profit, all while my niece's hotel bled money every month. She didn't know. None of them did. I still showed up to family functions in the same corduroy jacket and scuffed shoes. Still brought pies from the bakery instead of handmade soap. Still played the part. Until one afternoon when Melanie called me. Out of the blue. "Hey, Grandpa," she chirped, voice sticky sweet. "I was just thinking about you. You doing okay over there by yourself?" I paused. "I'm fine." "What?" "Well," she laughed. "I saw this TikTok about some old guy making soap, and for a second I thought, oh my God, is that Harold?" My stomach tightened. "You don't say." "Yeah," she went on. "It's cute, honestly. Like, it's adorable that people your age are getting into hobbies. It keeps your brain working, right?" I bit down on my lip hard enough to taste blood. "It's more than a hobby." "Oh, for sure," she said, clearly not listening. "Anyway, just checking in. We should get coffee sometime." My treat. And just like that, the call ended. She didn't want coffee. She wanted confirmation that I was still harmless. Still the joke in the corner. Still playing pretend while the adults ran the show. She had no idea what was coming. The hotel went on the market 6 months later. Quietly. Desperately. A foreclosure loomed, and they didn't have the cash to fight it. But I did. I had more than enough, thanks to my hobby. And I had something far more powerful than money. A memory of every eye roll, every insult, every condescending pat on the hand. So I called a lawyer, set up an LLC, made an offer below asking price. No one suspected. Why would they? Who would imagine that the guy who once burned a batch of lavender soap because he confused grams with ounces would be buying a whole damn hotel? The sale went through in under 4 weeks. And 2 days after that, I walked into the lobby with my suitcase in one hand and the deed in the other. Melanie stood behind the front desk, arguing with a vendor over the phone. She looked up and froze when she saw me. "Grandpa," she said, blinking. "What are you doing here?" "I'm checking in," I said calmly, placing my suitcase down with a satisfying thud. "Penthouse suite, please." She laughed, unsure if it was a joke. "I don't think." "Wait, do you have a reservation?" "No," I replied, sliding the deed across the desk. "I own the place." Her face went pale. Not instantly, not in a cartoonish gasp-in-faint sort of way. No, Melanie was too proud for that. She tried to hide it, blinking a few times like maybe she'd misread the papers I slid across the counter, like maybe this was just another one of my quaint misunderstandings. But her eyes kept going back to that first line. The name of the holding company, then the signature, then my name, printed clean and bold. She whispered, "You bought it." I nodded once. "Just like you said, retired in peace." She didn't say anything for a moment. Didn't even look at me. She just stared at the documents, lips parted like she was still deciding which version of reality to commit to. Finally, she let out a shallow laugh. "Well," she said, flicking her hair over her shoulder. "That's unexpected. You always told me to do something relaxing in retirement," I said, calm and even. "So I figured, why not come live in a place I already own?" Behind her, the vendor on the other end of the phone call was still yelling. She hung up without a word and motioned for Darren, her younger brother, to take over the desk. Then she turned to me, voice clipped. "Let's talk. Upstairs." The elevator ride was silent except for the slow hum of the old machinery. I could feel her staring at me, trying to piece together a story that made any sense. Her expression was tight, not quite angry, not quite scared, but definitely no longer amused. It was the same face she made when their ice machine broke the night of a wedding and she tried to make the couple think it was part of the rustic charm. That fake smile panic. That dread disguised as grace. When we stepped into the penthouse, she didn't offer me a seat. Didn't offer me water. Just stood with her arms crossed like I was the intruder. "I don't understand," she said. "Why would you buy this place?" "Why wouldn't I?" I asked, lowering myself slowly onto the dusty velvet armchair. "It was on the market. You needed the money. And I had some to spare." She flinched. "Since when?" "I told you," I said, folding my hands over my knee. My soap business did well. That made her laugh again, nervous this time, almost mechanical. Oh my God, you're serious? The soap thing? That actually made money. I didn't answer. She paced. Her heels clicked against the marble tile, echoing louder than they should have. I watched her, quietly, the way I used to watch storms roll in from the porch. There was a moment, just a sliver, where I thought she might say thank you. That despite all the snide comments and dismissals, she might recognize that I'd saved the hotel from collapse. But that wasn't the Klein way. Not her way, at least. Instead, she stopped in front of the window, back still to me, and said, "You blindsided us." "You blindsided yourselves?" I said. "You let a family business fall into disrepair. You treated advice like an insult. You asked for money, but never accountability. I did what no one else had the courage or humility to do." She spun around. "Humility? You think this is humble? You bought us out like a damn soap bar on clearance." My voice didn't rise, but it sharpened. "I bought the business," I said. "Not your ego." Word spread fast. By the end of the week, the rest of the family knew. Darren took it the best. He never really wanted to be in hospitality. He'd been dreaming of opening a food truck anyway. Scott, the eldest of the three, was humiliated. Said nothing to me directly, but posted a vague quote on Facebook about betrayals from within. Classic. Melanie, though. Melanie didn't take it lying down. She started showing up late, giving attitude to staff, rolling her eyes in team meetings. She'd always been the unofficial boss, title or no, but now that she wasn't signing the checks, the mask started to slip. Her contempt turned from passive to active. At first, I gave her space. Change stings. Pride wounds. I knew that. But then she started talking to guests. "You know," she told one honeymooning couple as they waited for room service, "my family built this place from the ground up. Now it's in the hands of someone who thinks soap and spreadsheets are interchangeable." I only heard about it from the concierge, a young man named Emery, who'd quietly taken a liking to me. When I called her into the office, she didn't even deny it. "I have a right to tell the truth," she snapped. "You have a right to your opinion," I corrected her. "But not to sabotage." She leaned back in the chair like she owned it. "What are you going to do? Fire me?" "I might," I said plainly, "if you keep choosing ego over the hotel's reputation." She laughed again, but this time it was bitter. Hollow. Like all the power she'd held her entire life was slipping through the cracks, and she didn't know how to hold anything else. "You've always resented us," she said. "Admit it. You never liked that Dad chose me to run things after he passed." I stared at her for a long time before I answered. "No," I said. "I resented that he chose someone who couldn't listen." Behind the scenes, the hotel started shifting. Slowly at first. I brought in Callie, my former soap operations manager, to consult. She was young, sharp, brutally efficient. She made enemies fast, but results faster. Within 2 months, costs were down 18%. Guest satisfaction rose. Maintenance was prioritized over aesthetics. We cut ties with overpriced vendors and invested in a new online booking system. Melanie fought every change. "You're turning this into a soap factory," she hissed at me one morning as we passed each other in the hallway. I smiled. "Clean, efficient, and profitable. Sounds like a good thing, doesn't it?" She didn't respond. But I knew. I could see it in her shoulders. In her silence. The fight was leaving her, and all that was left was fear. Fear that I wasn't just right, but better. Better at seeing people. At adjusting. At surviving. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even justice. It was evolution. And for once, I wasn't the one being left behind. The lobby felt different now. Asterisk asterisk. It was subtle, but it was there. The change in posture from the staff. The quieter hum of efficiency instead of barely concealed chaos. The fake smile energy that used to cling to the front desk had been replaced by something steadier, sharper. And that wasn't my imagination. That was Callie's doing. She was 28, all business, and wore her bluntness like armor. I'd hired her a few months back to act as the interim general manager, and she had a way of commanding respect without raising her voice. The staff didn't love her at first. They said she was too strict, too corporate, too cold. But you know what else she was? Competent. In 4 weeks, she cleaned up the scheduling disaster, set performance standards, and trimmed our bloated vendor list like a surgeon. By week 6, The hotel was running smoother than it had in years, which is exactly what set Melanie off. She walked into the weekly operations meeting already fuming, late as usual. Callie, never one to sugarcoat, looked up from her notes and said, "We've already started." "I can see that," Melanie snapped, throwing her purse on the table like it was a declaration of war. I didn't flinch. Neither did Callie. The rest of the room, the front desk manager, housekeeping supervisor, events coordinator, went stiff with silence. Everyone knew we were on a collision course. They just didn't expect the crash to come so soon. Melanie didn't sit. She just stood there, arms crossed, scanning the whiteboard covered in notes and figures. "What's this?" she asked, pointing to a projection chart Callie had drawn. "That's our adjusted revenue forecast based on current trends," Callie answered calmly. "We've increased weekday occupancy by 10%. If we maintain that, we'll close the quarter ahead." Melanie scoffed. "And who exactly gave you authority to set financial strategy?" I leaned forward. "I did." She turned toward me, eyes wide with disbelief. "You're letting her run the numbers now?" "She's not just running numbers," I said. "She's saving your father's hotel." That did it. "You think I don't know what you're doing?" she hissed, stepping closer to the table. "You're replacing me, bit by bit. You couldn't handle being irrelevant, so now you're cutting me out of my own legacy." I stood up then. Not quickly, not aggressively, but deliberately. The room held its breath. "You didn't build this legacy," I said, my voice low but firm. "You inherited it. And instead of nurturing it, you drained it. I didn't replace you, Melanie. You did that all by yourself." She stared at me, breathing hard. Her eyes glistened with something I hadn't seen in her in years, fear. Not just of being outmatched, but of being irrelevant. And that, for someone like her, was worse than failure. "I want a private meeting," she said through clenched teeth. Callie nodded and left the room. So did the rest of the team. The moment they were gone, Melanie dropped the performance. "What the hell are you doing?" she demanded. "This was supposed to be mine. Dad left it to us." "And you tried to sell it," I said. "Don't forget that part. We were desperate. And I stepped in," I replied. Quietly, respectfully. "I didn't humiliate you. I didn't announce it to the world. I gave you space to adapt. But you're not interested in adapting, are you?" She slumped into a chair finally, the fight leaking out of her like air from a punctured balloon. Her voice softened, but not from humility, from exhaustion. "I don't know how to do this anymore," she whispered. And for a flicker of a second, I saw the little girl she used to be, the one who followed her father around the hotel lobby, clutching a clipboard and pretending to manage things. That girl was still in there somewhere, buried under all the resentment and pride. But I couldn't save her. That wasn't my job. "This hotel can't survive on nostalgia," I said gently. "It needs structure. It needs someone who's willing to listen, adapt, and put the business first. I gave you that chance, but I won't let your stubbornness tank what's left." She looked up, eyes red. "So what now? You're just kicking me out." I shook my head. "I'm giving you a choice. Step back gracefully, or be removed officially." She blinked, stunned. "You'd really do that?" "I already did," I said. "You're no longer on payroll." The next day, she didn't show up. No texts, no email, not even a passive-aggressive Facebook post. The silence was louder than any screaming match. Her brothers followed her lead a few days later, each retreating in their own awkward way. Darren sent me a curt message thanking me for doing what had to be done. Scott just disappeared altogether. I'd expected resistance. What I got was surrender. And maybe that should have made me feel triumphant. But it didn't. Not exactly. It made me feel tired. The fallout wasn't dramatic, but it was thorough. Family group chats fell silent. Holiday plans got too complicated. Even Aaron, my youngest, seemed unsure how to treat me. He called one night, voice uncertain. "Did you really fire Melanie?" "I didn't fire her," I said. "I bought her out. Legally." "Still," he sighed. "You know how that looks." "Yeah," I said. "I do." Because to them, this was betrayal. But to me, it was survival. I hadn't taken the hotel to punish them. I'd taken it because they were too proud to ask for real help, and too reckless to admit they needed it. I didn't want revenge. I wanted dignity. And they couldn't give it to me. So I took it for myself. I moved into the penthouse 2 weeks later. It wasn't glamorous, not yet, but it had good bones. Callie had arranged for a deep cleaning crew, and I spent my first night up there with the windows open, watching the lights of the city flicker like distant stars. Below me, the hotel was humming with quiet energy. Guests checking in, room service clattering up the service elevator, the occasional burst of laughter from the bar downstairs. It was alive again, and so was I. I stood at the window, a cup of chamomile tea in hand, and whispered to no one in particular. Retired in peace, just like you asked. But this wasn't retirement. This was resurrection. The cracks didn't appear all at once. At first, it was little things. A bad online review mentioning a cold new vibe in the hotel. A strange, sarcastic voicemail left at the front desk. Someone asking if the soap bar was now running the bar. Then came the email. No name, just a burner account with the subject line. Let the old man rest. I forwarded it to Callie, who flagged it and moved on without fuss. But I knew exactly where it was coming from. Or rather, who. Melanie hadn't gone quietly. She'd gone underground. And from there, she began whispering. At first, it was to extended family, third cousins, out-of-town relatives, people who only knew me from childhood stories and grainy Thanksgiving photos. She told them I'd manipulated her, that I'd tricked the family into selling the hotel, that I'd taken advantage of her during a vulnerable time, that I was having a late-life breakdown, and had somehow turned soap bars into a hostile takeover. My phone didn't stop buzzing for days. Aunt Carol left a voicemail dripping with sugar and judgment. Harold, honey, just calling to say, I heard some things. I hope you're not overextending yourself. At your age, stress can be dangerous. Then Cousin Jeremy texted. Heard you booted Mel. Kinda harsh, man. Was that really necessary? Necessary? These people weren't around when the plumbing backed up and flooded 4 rooms because Melanie delayed maintenance for 6 months. They weren't in the meetings where she ignored occupancy data and called it gut instinct. They didn't hear her laugh in my face while asking for a $50,000 loan she had no intention of repaying. But sure, I was the villain now. It wasn't until the Whispers and Hospitality blog posted the hit piece that I realized she wasn't just venting. She was planning something. The blog, run by a gossipy ex-hotelier with too much time and too many sources, ran a story titled, From Grandpa to Guillotine, The Fall of Family at the Klein Hotel. I read it 3 times in silence. The article painted me as a power-hungry patriarch who overthrew the rightful heirs to their family business in a soap-fueled ego trip. It quoted an anonymous family source who claimed I'd been bitter ever since Melanie's father left me out of the original ownership plan. That wasn't just spin. That was war. I called Callie into the penthouse that night. She brought a notepad and a tight expression, sensing my mood the moment she stepped in. I handed her the article without a word. She read it in full, then closed the folder slowly. We could send a cease and desist, she offered. No, I said. I don't want to look defensive. She nodded. Then go on offense. I hesitated. Callie leaned forward. You've got a better story. You're not some cranky old man with a revenge fantasy. You're a businessman who saved a historic hotel from collapse and brought jobs back to people who needed them. You want to shut this narrative down? On yours. Loudly. It was the opposite of everything I'd been raised to do. My generation, especially in our family, was taught to stay quiet, endure, let the gossip die its own death. But this was different. This wasn't gossip. This was a public assassination of character. And if I didn't respond, I'd lose the one thing I'd fought so hard to get back: respect. 2 days later, I agreed to an interview with the Business Revival Journal, a modest online publication that catered to small business owners and second chancers. The reporter, Liza Tran, was sharp and fair. She spent 2 hours with me in the penthouse, walking through the hotel, talking to staff, even touring the soap-making space I'd set up in the basement for a special guest product line. At the end, she asked me point blank, why not just walk away? You were already retired. Why bother? I looked out the window, then back at her. Because they told me I was finished, I said. And I wasn't. The article dropped a week later with the headline, Soap, Steel, and Second Chances: How Harold Klein Reclaimed His Legacy. It spread faster than I expected. Local news picked it up. Then the Whispers and Hospitality blog retracted part of their story, quietly removing the quote about my ego trip. My inbox flipped from judgmental texts to curious inquiries. A podcast even reached out asking me to speak about reinventing at 68. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. Melanie, though, was about to make her final, most desperate move. It happened during a Saturday evening wedding. A big one, 160 guests, all dressed in pastel tones and floral prints, the kind of wedding that made or broke a hotel's reputation. We had a DJ, hors d'oeuvres, a signature cocktail called the Something Blue, and a rooftop ceremony that turned golden in the dusk light. Everything was going perfectly until Melanie showed up. Not as a guest, as a disruptor. She wasn't drunk, but she was charged, eyes wild with resentment, words laced with venom. She cornered the bride's mother in the lobby and told her the owner had stolen the hotel out from under her family. Then she confronted Callie in front of 2 servers and called her a plastic tyrant. Then, because she apparently hadn't humiliated herself enough, she climbed halfway up the staircase, turned to the crowd, and shouted, "You're all toasting to a thief." The music cut. Conversations halted. All eyes turned to her. I stepped forward before anyone else could. "Melanie," I said, calmly but firmly, "please leave." She pointed at me, finger trembling. "He's not the hero. He's the reason this place turned into a graveyard." I walked up the stairs until we were eye level. She looked at me like I'd betrayed her soul. I looked at her like I was finally, painfully, letting her go. "I gave you every chance," I said, low enough only she could hear. "And you spat on all of them." She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just left. Security walked her out through the side entrance. We comped the bride's cocktail hour. Callie gave a calm explanation to the wedding planner. By the next day, most guests had forgotten about the scene. But the staff hadn't. Neither had I. Melanie never came back to the hotel. Not as an employee. Not as a guest. Not even for a drink. She disappeared back into whatever version of the story she decided to keep telling herself. I didn't chase her. I couldn't. That night, I sat on the rooftop terrace in the same chair I'd claimed months ago. The city buzzed below me, alive and indifferent. I watched the traffic lights blink, the bars empty, the last guests slip into elevators. And I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit before. I didn't miss her. I missed what I thought she could be. But the version of her that existed now, that clung to entitlement, to bitterness, to a name without the weight of responsibility, had no place here anymore. I hadn't just bought a hotel. I'd taken back my story. The thing about truth is, it doesn't care how long you run from it. It'll wait, sit quietly while you spiral, and then catch you when you least expect it, usually right in the middle of your lie. That's what happened to Melanie. The rooftop outburst didn't kill her reputation, not immediately. In fact, for a few days, there was a weird little burst of sympathy for her online. Someone had recorded part of her staircase tirade and uploaded it to TikTok with the caption, "Girl boss gets betrayed by grandpa." It got a few thousand views. Comments were mixed. Half were people making jokes about family drama. The other half were armchair therapists dissecting generational trauma like it was a board game. But what none of them realized, what Melanie definitely hadn't counted on, was how fast the internet turns on you when you play the victim too loudly. Because people started asking questions. If she was so innocent, why had the hotel been listed for sale in the first place? Why hadn't she fixed the mold problem in room 306 that guests had complained about for months? And what about that Yelp review from last year, where a bride claimed the event manager vanished mid-reception? Then someone found her Instagram, still public, still filled with filtered selfies and motivational quotes, and noticed the timestamps. Lavish dinners, spa retreats, new bags, all posted during the period when the hotel was supposedly bleeding money. And just like that, sympathy turned into suspicion. Meanwhile, the Business Revival Journal piece I'd done gained traction, quietly, steadily. Not viral, not scandalous, just honest. A well-shot photo of me sitting on the penthouse balcony in a navy sweater, hands clasped, eyes focused. The headline still made me pause every time. He was told to retire. Instead, he rebuilt the business that cast him aside. I wasn't a sensation. I was a story, a symbol, a slow burn example that maybe, just maybe, you could still matter after 60. And that stung Melanie more than anything I could have said to her. Because in her version of events, I was supposed to fade. Instead, I'd become visible. The final collapse came via group chat. Not a phone call, not a letter. A group chat. A ping at 7:14 p.m. on a Thursday. Family thread. Scott, can we talk about the hotel? Darren, what now? Scott, I just got a call from Uncle Rick. Apparently people are talking. About how we ran it into the ground. About what Harold did to save it. Melanie, are you kidding me? You're taking his side now. Scott, I'm saying maybe we should have listened. Melanie, wow. Good to know where everyone stands. Darren, Mel, come on. It's not about sides. It's about the truth. Melanie, the truth? The truth is he humiliated us. Publicly. Scott, he saved us. Melanie, I hope you both enjoy kissing his ass. I'm done. And just like that, she left the group. Left the narrative. Left us. I didn't say anything in the chat. I didn't gloat or chime in. I just stared at the screen for a long time. That little notification, Melanie has left the group, feeling heavier than I expected. I wasn't sad. I wasn't relieved. I was just tired. There had been a time when I thought she might come around. That once the dust settled, once she saw the numbers improving and the hotel thriving again, she might understand. Might even thank me. But that time was gone now. She'd chosen the story that made her feel least responsible. And the rest of us? We were left to clean up the mess. Aaron stopped by the next weekend. He didn't warn me, just showed up at the lobby desk and asked if I had time. I brought him upstairs, poured us each a glass of seltzer, and sat across from him while he looked out at the skyline with that half-worried, half-curious face he always wore when trying to parent his parent. So, he said after a pause, you're famous now. I chuckled. Hardly. You know she's still furious, right? I figured. He hesitated. Do you care? I thought about that for a long time. No, I said finally. But I used to. He stayed for an hour. We didn't talk much about the hotel. Mostly we talked about my soap business, which had recently landed a regional contract with a boutique chain. He asked about the scent blends, the packaging, the logistics. For the first time, he looked at me not like a dad stuck in his routines, but like a man, a builder, someone with a mind worth respecting. When he stood to leave, he paused at the door. She might never come around, he said quietly. I know, I said. Would you want her to? That one caught me off guard. I want her to grow, I said. Whether or not I'm there to see it. He nodded and left. A week later, I saw her. It wasn't planned. She was walking out of a cafe a block from the hotel as I was coming back from a supplier meeting. Our eyes met. She froze. I stopped too. For a moment, the sidewalk was too small for both of us. She didn't speak. Neither did I. She looked thinner, tired. I opened my mouth. Just slightly. Just enough to maybe say hello. But she turned and walked away before I could. Not in anger. Not in hatred. Just gone. That night, I stood in the lobby and watched as Callie checked in a new couple. Early 30s, trendy luggage, matching tattoos. They'd booked the honeymoon suite. Said they found the hotel on a blog about cool places with weird redemption stories. I smiled at that. The place was healing, bit by bit. Not because I'd made it perfect, but because I'd finally stopped waiting for someone else to tell me I mattered. The penthouse didn't sparkle. It never had, not even in its heyday. It had character instead. Scratches on the hardwood that told stories, a lingering scent of old pipe tobacco in the corners of the living room, and windows that sometimes whistled when the wind pushed too hard against them. It didn't shine, but it stood, just like me. I'd lived in that space for a year now. 1 full year since I bought the hotel out from under my niece and her brothers. 1 full year since I went from retired relic to owner, operator, and, according to one local paper, the comeback nobody saw coming. Funny how quiet things got after the noise died down. Melanie never returned. Not a call, not a letter, not even a Merry Christmas text. And while some part of me still imagined she might one day knock on the door, tearfully or defiantly, I'd finally stopped waiting for it. Letting go wasn't a moment. It was a slow unclenching of fingers, of memories, of expectations that never served me in the first place. The hotel, on the other hand, had never been busier. Callie was now the full-time general manager. She'd hired a new events team, overhauled the rooftop bar, and got us on the shortlist for 2 national travel blogs. I still oversaw financials, still walked the floors twice a week, still chatted with the housekeepers, and slipped 20s into tip jars when no one was looking. But mostly, I stayed out of the way, letting capable people do what they're good at. That's something Melanie never learned. But I had. There was a moment, about 2 months ago, when a guest stopped me in the lobby. Middle-aged woman, business casual, clearly a traveler who'd seen her fair share of hotels. She said, "You the Herald they wrote about?" "I am," I answered cautiously. She smiled and extended a hand. "Just wanted to say thanks. My dad's in the same boat. Retired, underestimated. I sent him your article. He's starting a woodworking Etsy shop now." I didn't know what to say. Still don't. I shook her hand, nodded, and walked back up to the penthouse with a lump in my throat I couldn't explain. The truth was, I didn't do all this to prove Melanie wrong. Not really. That was just the surface motivation, the anger that got me out of bed when resentment was easier than grief. But the deeper reason? The one I couldn't admit, even to myself at first? I was lonely. I missed being useful, missed being seen. After my wife died, the house went quiet in ways I didn't know how to fight. I kept thinking if I just stayed patient, stayed polite, someone would pull me back into the fold, into relevance. But families don't always work that way, especially not ours. And eventually, I realized I had to give myself the second chance no one else was offering. One rainy Sunday morning, I stood by the penthouse window, coffee in hand, watching the streets below. Cars rolled by, umbrellas bobbed on the sidewalk, and somewhere down the block a saxophonist played under a storefront awning like it was a stage built just for him. I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady, settled. There were no more battles to win, no final confrontation, just a series of quiet mornings and honest work in a building full of people who, like me, were doing their best with what they had left. That's more than I ever expected to get at this stage in life, and more than they ever thought I'd reach. I thought of Melanie more often than I admitted, not with anger anymore, just with that aching kind of curiosity reserved for people we once believed would walk beside us forever. I wondered if she was working somewhere else now, if she ever told anyone her side of the story, if she still checked the hotel's website at night when no one was watching. I wouldn't blame her if she did. It was hers once, and maybe, in some fractured way, it always will be. But it's mine now too. And this version, this strange, hard-earned, resurrected version, runs better than any dream we ever had of it. Every night before bed, I walk the penthouse one last time. Not out of habit, out of ritual. I check the windows, the balcony doors, the old grandfather clock in the corner. Then I sit in my chair by the window and say it one last time, quietly to myself. Retired in peace. And this time, I mean it. Final reflection. I used to think peace meant silence, that it meant fading out without friction, that if I just let the world pass me by, I'd eventually find serenity. But peace, real peace, isn't quiet. It's earned. It's fought for. It's built brick by brick out of the pieces they tried to break off you. I didn't burn the bridge to my family, but I stopped waiting at the end of it, hoping they'd cross. Now, I live on my side, comfortably, unapologetically, and if they ever decide to visit, I'll be here, in the penthouse, watching the sun rise over a city I was never meant to conquer, only survive. And finally, I have. If you've ever been told to give up, to sit down, or that your time has passed, this story is for you. Not every comeback has to be loud. Sometimes, the greatest revenge is quietly rebuilding the life they said you were too old to dream about. If you've been underestimated by your own family or chose to stand firm in your worth, drop a comment below. Your story deserves to be heard and remembered.